Your apartment is closer to the airport, my sister Amanda texted at 10 p.m. on a Thursday night. I'm dropping off my 3 kids for 2 weeks. Derek surprised me with Bora Bora. I stared at my phone in disbelief. I had just finished a grueling double shift at the pediatric hospital and could barely keep my eyes open. I wrote back immediately, "I'm not home." Her response came within seconds. "Mom has your spare key and she's letting us in. We're already on our way." I smiled grimly at my phone screen and immediately called building security. "Change my locks right now," I told them urgently. "When she arrives with those 4 suitcases tonight, the doorman will have very different instructions than she expects." The lobby of my downtown apartment building buzzed with unexpected drama at 11 p.m. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I watched Amanda's silver SUV pull up to the curb with a screech of brakes. My sister emerged wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite the late hour. She yanked open the back doors and began pulling out oversized suitcases, while 3 small figures stumbled out behind her. Emma, her 9-year-old daughter, rubbed sleepy eyes and clutched a worn, stuffed rabbit. Tyler, 7, dragged a superhero backpack behind him, and little Sophia, barely 4, whimpered softly while holding a juice box. The children looked confused and exhausted, still wearing their pajamas under hastily thrown-on jackets. Brad, our night doorman, stood firmly behind the marble reception desk as Amanda burst through the glass doors. His usually friendly demeanor had transformed into professional politeness. I remained hidden behind the decorative column near the elevators, watching the scene unfold. "Hi there, I'm Amanda Walsh, Christie's sister," she announced breathlessly, gesturing toward the children trailing behind her. "We need to get upstairs to her apartment right away. These little ones are practically falling asleep on their feet." Brad consulted his computer screen with deliberate slowness. "I apologize, ma'am, but I don't see any authorization for visitors to apartment 407 tonight." Amanda's smile faltered slightly. "Oh, there must be some misunderstanding. My mother has a spare key and Christy is expecting us. We spoke earlier this evening." "I'm afraid I have strict instructions," Brad replied firmly. "No visitors are permitted to apartment 407 without direct authorization from the tenant." The color drained from Amanda's face before being replaced by an angry flush. "This is absolutely ridiculous. I'm her sister. These are her niece and nephews. We've driven 45 minutes through traffic to get here." Her voice escalated with each word, causing other residents in the lobby to turn and stare. Emma instinctively moved closer to Tyler, both children sensing the growing tension. Sophia began to cry softly, overwhelmed by the unfamiliar surroundings and her mother's raised voice. "Ma'am, please lower your voice," Brad said calmly. "You're disturbing other residents." "I'll raise my voice as much as I want," Amanda snapped. "This is a family emergency. My husband surprised me with a trip to Bora Bora and we're leaving tomorrow morning. I need to get these children upstairs immediately." Several residents had gathered near the mailboxes, some discreetly filming the confrontation with their phones. Mrs. Patterson from the 3rd floor shook her head disapprovingly, while Mr. Chen whispered something to his wife about the late-hour disturbance. Amanda noticed the growing audience and played to them dramatically. "Can you believe this? I'm being denied access to my own sister's apartment? This is discrimination. I'll be filing a complaint with the building management first thing tomorrow morning." Brad remained unmoved by her theatrics. "I suggest you contact your sister directly, ma'am. Perhaps there's been a communication error." Communication error. Amanda's voice reached a new pitch. "I have texts proving she knew we were coming, and I have a spare key." She fumbled in her expensive leather purse and produced a silver key, waving it triumphantly. "See, my mother gave this to me specifically for emergencies like this." "I'm sorry, ma'am, but the locks were changed this evening. That key will no longer work." The key slipped from Amanda's fingers and clattered onto the polished marble floor. The sound echoed through the suddenly silent lobby like a gunshot. Even little Sophia stopped crying, sensing something significant had just happened. 20 minutes later, my mother Helen burst through the lobby doors like a hurricane. At 58, she still commanded attention with her silver hair styled in an elegant bob and her no-nonsense attitude. She wore a navy blue coat thrown hastily over her nightgown, and her face showed the strain of being awakened by Amanda's frantic phone call. "What is the meaning of this?" she demanded, marching directly to Brad's desk. "I gave my daughter that spare key for legitimate family purposes. You cannot deny entry to these children." "Ma'am, I understand your concern, but building security policies are very clear. Only the tenant can authorize access." Helen's eyes blazed with indignation. These are Christy's own flesh and blood, her niece and nephews. What kind of heartless sister refuses to help family in an emergency? The children huddled together on one of the leather couches, confused by the adult conflict swirling around them. Emma tried to comfort Sophia while Tyler stared at the ceiling, clearly wishing he could disappear. "I demand you call Christy down here this instant," Helen declared, pounding her fist on the marble counter. "She needs to explain herself face to face." Brad picked up the house phone and dialed my extension. "Miss Thompson, your family members are here in the lobby and would like to speak with you." I took a deep breath and emerged from my hiding spot. All eyes turned to me as I walked across the lobby in my hospital scrubs, my brown hair pulled back in a messy ponytail and exhaustion written across my face. "Christy," Amanda exclaimed with false sweetness. "Thank goodness there's been some terrible misunderstanding. This doorman won't let us upstairs." I looked at my sister's perfectly made-up face, then at my mother's expectant expression, and finally at the 3 tired children who had been dragged into this mess. My heart ached for Emma, Tyler, and Sophia, but I knew I had to stand firm. "There's no misunderstanding," I said quietly. "I told you I wasn't available to babysit tonight." "But this isn't babysitting," Amanda protested. "This is family helping family. Derek surprised me with this amazing trip, and we leave tomorrow. I've already packed everything the kids need." The security footage that Brad would later show me revealed the shocking truth about why I had been so adamant about changing those locks tonight. The next morning, building manager Carlos Rodriguez sat across from me in the security office, his weathered face grave with concern. As a former police detective, he had an eye for suspicious patterns, and what he had discovered in reviewing months of security footage would change everything I thought I knew about my sister. "Miss Thompson, I think you need to see this," Carlos said, pulling up video files on his computer screen. "After last night's incident, I decided to review our security logs going back 6 months. The first video clip showed Amanda entering my building on a Tuesday afternoon in March while I was working a 12-hour shift at the hospital. She used her spare key confidently as if she belonged there and carried what appeared to be a small overnight bag. "She's been coming here regularly," Carlos explained, clicking to the next file. "Usually on days when the parking garage logs show your car isn't here." My stomach dropped as I watched clip after clip of Amanda entering my apartment building without my knowledge or permission. In one video from April, she arrived with 2 other women I didn't recognize, both carrying wine bottles and laughing loudly. In another, from May, she emerged from the elevator at 2 a.m., stumbling slightly and clearly intoxicated. "But that's not the worst of it," Carlos continued grimly. "Look at this footage from 3 weeks ago." The screen showed Amanda handing my spare key to a teenage girl with long auburn hair and multiple piercings. The girl took the key eagerly and headed toward the elevators, with a young man who appeared to be her boyfriend. "That's Jenny Martinez, Amanda's regular babysitter," I whispered, recognizing the girl from family photos. "But why would she give Jenny my key?" "According to the timestamps, your sister was at some kind of spa retreat that weekend. She posted about it on social media, but she gave the babysitter permission to use your apartment as a hangout spot while you were working night shifts." The implications hit me like a physical blow. Not only had Amanda been violating my privacy for months, but she had also given access to teenagers who had no right to be in my home. I thought about all the times I had noticed small things out of place, missing items I had attributed to my own forgetfulness, and the mysterious wine stains on my white couch that I couldn't remember making. Carlos pulled up another video file. This is from that same weekend. You'll want to see what happens around midnight on Saturday. The footage showed Jenny and her boyfriend in my lobby clearly returning from a night out. They were both unsteady on their feet, and the boyfriend carried what appeared to be a bottle of liquor. As they waited for the elevator, they began arguing loudly, their voices echoing through the normally quiet lobby. Other residents filed noise complaints that weekend, Carlos explained. They thought the disturbance was coming from your apartment. Mrs. Patterson in 304 was particularly upset. She said the music was so loud it woke up her newborn baby. I felt sick thinking about my neighbors associating me with disruptive behavior I had never engaged in. My reputation in the building had always been impeccable, and I prided myself on being a considerate neighbor who respected quiet hours and building policies. There's more, Carlos said reluctantly. The cleaning staff reported finding broken glass in your apartment's hallway last month, specifically pieces of what appeared to be an antique vase. My hand flew to my mouth as I thought about my grandmother's beautiful blue and white porcelain vase that had sat on my hallway table for years. It had been a wedding gift to my grandmother in 1945, one of the few valuable items that had survived my grandmother's passing and made its way to me. I had noticed it missing several weeks ago, but assumed I had moved it somewhere safer and forgotten. They broke my grandmother's vase, I whispered, tears forming in my eyes. The cleaning staff said they found what appeared to be a hasty attempt to clean up the mess. Someone had swept up most of the pieces but missed several small fragments under the hallway table. They assumed you knew about the accident and had chosen not to report it. Carlos continued clicking through files showing me a pattern of unauthorized entries that painted a picture of systematic violation of my privacy and property. Amanda had been treating my apartment like her personal extension, a convenient downtown location for entertaining friends, hosting gatherings, and apparently providing teenage babysitters with an unsupervised party venue. But the most disturbing discovery came yesterday after I started investigating these incidents more thoroughly. Carlos said, pulling up a different type of document on his screen. I contacted some of the other residents who had filed noise complaints, and several of them mentioned something very concerning. He showed me typed statements from 3 different neighbors, all reporting similar conversations they had with Amanda during her unauthorized visits to the building. According to Mrs. Patterson, your sister told her that she co-owns your apartment, Carlos read from the first statement. Amanda claimed that she had helped with the down payment and that she has equal rights to use the space whenever she needs it. My blood ran cold. I had bought my apartment 3 years ago using my own savings, a small inheritance from my grandmother, and a mortgage based solely on my income as a pediatric nurse. Amanda had never contributed a single dollar to the purchase, nor had she ever offered to help with any of the monthly expenses. Mr. and Mrs. Chen reported a similar conversation. Carlos continued. Amanda told them that the apartment serves as a family investment property and that she frequently stays there when visiting downtown for business meetings. The third statement came from the building superintendent, who had encountered Amanda in the laundry room 2 months earlier. She had been washing what appeared to be her own clothes and had explained that she was temporarily staying in the apartment while her house was being renovated. She's been lying to everyone, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, creating this elaborate fiction that she has legitimate rights to my home. Carlos nodded sympathetically. There's one more thing, Miss Thompson. Yesterday, when I was reviewing the access logs more carefully, I noticed something troubling about the pattern of entries. Your sister hasn't just been using your apartment for social purposes. He pulled up a spreadsheet showing entry and exit times for the past 6 months. The data revealed that Amanda had been accessing my apartment almost weekly, often staying for several hours at a time and frequently removing items when she left. The timestamps show she typically arrives carrying one small bag, but leaves with multiple bags or boxes. Sometimes she makes several trips to her car loading items from your apartment. I thought about my missing jewelry, the expensive skincare products that seemed to disappear faster than I could use them, and the wine collection I'd been building that had mysteriously dwindled over the months. Items I had assumed were lost during my busy work schedule had actually been systematically stolen by my own sister. This explains why my makeup always seemed to run out so quickly. I said pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place, and my good wine that I was saving for special occasions. The security footage shows her removing items that appear to match your descriptions, Carlos confirmed. Designer handbags, small boxes that could contain jewelry, and what appears to be bottles from a wine collection. The betrayal cut deeper than I had ever imagined possible. This wasn't just about refusing to babysit on short notice or being inconsiderate about my work schedule. Amanda had been systematically violating my home, my privacy, and my trust for months, all while maintaining the pretense of being a loving sister who deserved access to my space and belongings. But the revelation that would shatter my family's foundation was still to come. 2 days after Carlos showed me the security footage, I sat in the office of Patrick Wu, the family attorney who had handled my grandmother's estate 3 years earlier. The manila folder in my hands contained documents that would expose the depth of Amanda's deception and nearly destroy our family's financial stability. Patrick, a soft-spoken man in his 50s with graying temples and wire-rimmed glasses, studied the paperwork I had brought him with growing alarm. His usually calm demeanor cracked as he realized the implications of what he was reviewing. "Christy, these documents are very troubling," he said, adjusting his glasses. "Your sister has filed paperwork with the county claiming that she provided $25,000 toward your apartment's down payment." I stared at him in disbelief. "That's completely false. I have all the financial records from the purchase. Every dollar came from my savings, my grandmother's inheritance, and my pre-approved mortgage. I believe you, but Amanda has created what appears to be a very convincing paper trail," Patrick explained, spreading several documents across his mahogany desk. "She's filed these forms claiming a financial interest in your property, and she's used them to justify taking out a loan against what she calls her investment." My hands trembled as I examined the forged documents. Amanda had somehow obtained copies of legitimate paperwork from my apartment purchase and had altered them to include her name as a co-contributor. The forgeries were sophisticated enough to fool a casual observer, complete with notary stamps and official-looking seals. "How much money are we talking about?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. "According to these loan documents, your mother took out a $30,000 second mortgage on her house based on Amanda's claims that she needed the money to protect her investment in your property." The room began to spin around me. My mother had always lived modestly on her teacher's pension, and her small house in the suburbs was her only significant asset. The thought that Amanda had manipulated our mother into risking her financial security made me physically ill. "Where did that money actually go?" I managed to ask. Patrick pulled up Amanda's social media profiles on his computer screen. Based on what I can piece together from public records and her own social media posts, Amanda and Derek took an expensive vacation to Europe last spring. The timing corresponds exactly with when your mother obtained the loan. The photos on Amanda's Facebook page told the story clearly. Luxury hotels in Paris, expensive restaurants in Rome, designer shopping trips in Milan. She had documented every extravagant detail of a 3-week European vacation that my hard-working mother had unknowingly funded through the mortgage on her own home. "But there's more," Patrick continued grimly. "Amanda has been using her claimed ownership of your apartment as collateral for additional financial activities." He showed me credit applications and loan documents that painted an even more disturbing picture. Amanda had convinced multiple lenders that she owned a stake in valuable downtown real estate, allowing her to secure credit cards and personal loans that she had no realistic ability to repay. "She's essentially been living off credit based on assets she doesn't actually own," Patrick explained. "And when creditors start demanding payment, they're going to come after the property she's claimed as collateral." I thought about Derek, Amanda's husband, who worked as a software engineer and had always seemed like a decent, hardworking man. Does Derek know about any of this? "That's where the situation becomes even more complicated," Patrick said, pulling up another set of documents. Based on these financial records, Amanda has been hiding significant debt from her husband. She's opened accounts using only her maiden name and has been intercepting mail to prevent Derek from discovering the extent of their financial problems. The portrait that emerged was of a woman living a complete double life. To Derek and the children, Amanda appeared to be a successful real estate agent contributing to the household finances. In reality, she had been funding their lifestyle through increasingly desperate borrowing, using lies about owning property she had never purchased. "How much total debt are we talking about?" I asked, bracing myself for the answer. Patrick consulted his notes. "From what I can determine so far, Amanda owes approximately $47,000 to various creditors, all of it secured by fraudulent claims about ownership or investment in your apartment." My phone rang, interrupting our discussion. Derek's name appeared on the caller ID, and I answered with a heavy heart, knowing that the conversation would likely destroy his world just as mine had been shattered. "Christy, I need to talk to you about something urgent," Derek said, his voice strained with anxiety. "Emma said something yesterday that's been bothering me, and I can't get it out of my mind." "What did she say?" "She was playing with her dollhouse, and she started talking about how Mommy takes pretty things from Aunt Christie's house to make our house prettier. When I asked her what she meant, she described jewelry and pictures that I've never seen Amanda buy, but that have appeared in our bedroom over the past few months." I closed my eyes, realizing that even Derek and Amanda's children had been unknowingly drawn into the web of lies. Emma, at 9 years old, had observed her mother's theft without understanding that what she was witnessing was wrong. "Derek, there's something you need to know about Amanda's activities," I began carefully. "I was afraid you were going to say that." He replied, his voice heavy with resignation. "I've been noticing things that don't add up for months, but I kept telling myself there had to be reasonable explanations." Over the next 20 minutes, I explained everything I had discovered: the unauthorized apartment entries, the stolen belongings, the forged documents, and the debt Amanda had accumulated using fraudulent claims about property ownership. Derek listened in stunned silence, occasionally asking clarifying questions that revealed he had suspected some form of deception, but had never imagined the scope of Amanda's lies. "She told me she was having an amazing year in real estate," Derek said quietly. "She said her commissions were so high that she could afford to take time off for family trips and shopping. I should have questioned how she could be so successful when I never saw her working with clients or attending real estate events." "This isn't your fault, Derek," I assured him. "Amanda has been deliberately deceiving everyone who cares about her." "What happens now?" he asked, the weight of impending consequences clear in his voice. Before I could answer, my phone beeped with another incoming call. My mother's name appeared on the screen, and I knew that the confrontation I had been dreading was about to begin. "Derek, I have to take this call from Mom. Can we continue this conversation later?" "Of course." "And Christy, thank you for being honest with me. I know this couldn't have been easy." I switched to my mother's call, and her voice immediately filled with defensive anger. "Christy Marie Thompson, I want an explanation for your behavior toward your sister." She began using my full name in the tone that had terrified me as a child. "Amanda called me crying this morning, saying you've been spreading lies about her and trying to turn Derek against her." "Mom, I need to tell you some things about Amanda that you're not going to want to hear," I replied, steeling myself for the battle ahead. "I don't want to hear any more of your jealous accusations," Helen snapped. "Amanda has always been the generous one in this family. She's the one who offered to help you with your apartment when you were struggling financially." The irony of my mother's words would have been almost comical if the situation weren't so tragic. Amanda had convinced our mother that her crimes were actually acts of generosity, and that my legitimate grievances were symptoms of jealousy and ingratitude. But I had one more devastating revelation that would finally expose the true depth of Amanda's betrayal, and it would come from the most unexpected source. The fluorescent lights in the pediatric ward cast harsh shadows as I shared my lunch break with Sarah Mitchell, my closest colleague and friend. At 31, Sarah had worked alongside me for 4 years, and her steady presence had gotten me through countless difficult shifts and personal challenges. Today, her auburn hair was pulled back in a practical bun, and her green eyes reflected genuine concern as I explained the situation with Amanda. "You need to document everything before you make any decisions about pressing charges," Sarah advised, unwrapping her turkey sandwich with methodical precision. "My ex-husband tried something similar with credit card fraud, and the key was having irrefutable evidence before confronting anyone." I appreciated Sarah's practical approach. As a single mother who had survived a contentious divorce, she understood the importance of protecting yourself legally before emotions took over. Her advice had always been grounded in real-world experience rather than idealistic notions about family loyalty. Patrick set up a meeting with Detective Martinez for tomorrow morning. I explained picking at my salad without much appetite. He specializes in financial crimes and identity theft. "Good. You need law enforcement on your side before this escalates further. Family situations like this can get ugly fast, especially when significant money is involved." My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. The message was brief but chilling. "We need to meet. Emma told me something else about Mommy's secrets. This is Derek." I showed the message to Sarah, whose expression immediately grew serious. "This doesn't sound good," she said. "What do you think Emma discovered?" I called Derek back immediately and he answered on the first ring. His voice was tight with controlled anger and disappointment. "Christy, I confronted Amanda last night about what you told me." Derek began without preamble. "She denied everything at first, but when I showed her some financial statements I found hidden in her car, she finally broke down and admitted to taking things from your apartment." "How much did she confess to?" "She claimed it was just borrowing items occasionally, and that she always intended to return everything. But Emma overheard our argument and came into the bedroom crying. She said she needed to tell Daddy the truth about Mommy's secret treasure box." My stomach clenched with dread. "What kind of treasure box?" Emma led me to a locked storage container in Amanda's closet. Inside, I found jewelry, expensive makeup bottles of wine, and even some electronics that Amanda claimed she had purchased. But Emma insisted that she had watched Mommy take all of those items from your apartment. The betrayal felt even more personal, knowing that Amanda had been displaying my stolen belongings like trophies in her own bedroom. The image of my sister admiring my grandmother's jewelry while her daughter watched, thinking this behavior was normal, made my heart ache. "But that's not the worst part." Derek continued, his voice breaking slightly. "I found documents in the storage box that suggest Amanda has been forging your signature on various financial papers. There are loan applications, credit card agreements, and even what appears to be a fraudulent lease agreement claiming you're subletting part of your apartment to her." I nearly dropped the phone. Amanda hadn't just been stealing my belongings. She had been stealing my identity to fund her deceptive lifestyle. The scope of her crimes was expanding beyond what I had ever imagined possible. "Derek, you need to keep those documents safe. They're evidence of serious felony charges." "I've already made copies and put the originals in a safety deposit box," he replied, revealing a practical streak I hadn't known he possessed. "I also checked our joint bank accounts and found several transactions I can't explain. Amanda has been transferring money to accounts I've never heard of, and she's been paying bills for services we don't use." Over the next hour, Derek and I pieced together a more complete picture of Amanda's financial deception. She had been living far beyond their means, funding expensive purchases and lifestyle choices through a complex web of fraud that centered on her false claims about owning part of my apartment. The most devastating discovery came when Derek accessed Amanda's personal email account and found correspondence with a gambling website. The account records showed that Amanda had been betting thousands of dollars on online casino games and sports events, losing money faster than she could steal it or borrow it through fraudulent means. "She has a gambling addiction," Derek said quietly. "All of this lying and stealing has been to feed her addiction. The expensive trips, the designer clothes, the nights out with friends, it was all funded by gambling winnings that she then lost again. I met with Detective Martinez the following morning in a sterile conference room at the downtown police station. At 42, Detective Martinez had spent 15 years investigating financial crimes, and her no-nonsense approach immediately put me at ease. She listened to my story with professional attention, taking detailed notes and asking pointed questions about dates, amounts, and evidence. Identity theft combined with property fraud is a serious felony in this state. Detective Martinez explained, reviewing the documents Patrick had prepared. If your sister has been using your credit and property claims to secure loans totaling $47,000, she's looking at potential prison time. What are my options? I asked. You can press full criminal charges, which would likely result in immediate arrest and prosecution. Or you can give her an opportunity to make voluntary restitution and seek treatment with the understanding that criminal charges remain an option if she doesn't comply. I thought about Emma, Tyler, and Sophia, who had already been traumatized by the instability in their family. While Amanda deserved to face consequences for her actions, I wasn't sure that destroying their childhood was the right approach. I want to give her one chance to confess publicly and begin making amends, I decided. But I need assurance that she'll face real consequences if she refuses or tries to continue lying. Detective Martinez nodded approvingly. That's often the most effective approach with family situations. Public accountability combined with the threat of criminal prosecution can motivate genuine change. I spent the rest of the week planning a confrontation that would expose Amanda's lies to our entire extended family. The setting would be our mother's traditional Sunday barbecue, where relatives and family friends gathered monthly for food and conversation. Amanda would be expecting a typical family gathering, but instead she would face a reckoning that would change our family dynamics forever. But I still hadn't discovered the most shocking revelation of all the truth about what Amanda had done with our grandfather's inheritance. The aroma of grilled hamburgers and the sound of children's laughter filled the backyard of my mother's modest suburban home on Sunday afternoon. Under normal circumstances, the monthly family barbecue represented everything I loved about our extended family: Uncle Bob's terrible jokes, Aunt Lisa's famous potato salad, and the way our cousins Jake and Morgan still treated me like their favorite aunt, despite being adults themselves. Today, however, the familiar setting felt charged with tension as I arrived carrying a thick manila folder and accompanied by Detective Martinez, who had agreed to attend as my friend rather than in an official capacity. She wore casual clothes and a warm smile, but her presence represented the seriousness of the situation I was about to expose. Amanda stood near the grill wearing a flowing sundress and oversized sunglasses, animatedly describing her upcoming trip to Bora Bora to anyone within earshot. She gestured dramatically with a glass of wine, clearly relishing the attention and envy her vacation plans generated among the family members. Derek surprised me completely. She gushed to Aunt Lisa, who nodded politely while arranging condiments on the picnic table. Can you imagine Bora Bora? I've always dreamed of those overwater bungalows, and now it's actually happening. Uncle Bob, a gentleman in his 60s who worked as a high school history teacher, approached the conversation with characteristic enthusiasm. That sounds amazing. Amanda Derek must be doing very well with his software job to afford such an extravagant surprise. Amanda's smile flickered for just a moment before she recovered her composure. Oh, you know how it is with successful couples. We've both been working so hard, and Derek felt like we deserved something special. I noticed Derek standing alone near the children's swing set, watching Emma, Tyler, and Sophia play with forced cheerfulness. His posture was tense, and he avoided making eye contact with other family members, clearly struggling with the knowledge of his wife's deceptions. Mom emerged from the kitchen carrying a large bowl of her famous coleslaw, her face glowing with pride at having both daughters present for the family gathering. At 58, Helen still moved with the energy of someone much younger, and her genuine joy at seeing the family together made what I was about to do even more difficult. Christy, I'm so glad you could make it, Mom said, setting down the bowl and giving me a warm hug. I was worried you might still be upset about the misunderstanding with Amanda's travel plans. Actually, Mom, I think it's time we cleared up that misunderstanding, I replied, glancing toward Detective Martinez for reassurance. Cousin Jake, now 22 and finishing his senior year at the State University, joined our conversation with his characteristic good humor. Hey, Aunt Christy, Mom said there was some drama about babysitting the other night. I hope Amanda wasn't too demanding about her vacation plans. His younger sister, Morgan, 19, and home from college for the weekend, rolled her eyes dramatically. Jake, you're so clueless about family politics. Amanda always expects everyone to drop everything for her convenience. I realized this was the perfect opportunity to address the entire family at once, while everyone was relaxed and receptive to conversation. I called for attention by gently tapping my fork against my water glass, a sound that had traditionally signaled important family announcements at our gatherings. Everyone, I need to share some information that affects our whole family. I began, my voice carrying clearly across the backyard. Amanda looked up from her conversation with Aunt Lisa, her expression shifting from mild curiosity to concern as she noticed the serious tone of my voice and the presence of Detective Martinez beside me. Before Amanda leaves for her vacation, there are some financial irregularities that need to be addressed. I continued opening the manila folder with deliberate precision. The casual chatter around the backyard gradually faded as family members sensed the gravity of the situation. Uncle Bob set down his beer and moved closer, while Aunt Lisa instinctively positioned herself where she could see both Amanda and me clearly. "What kind of irregularities?" Helen asked, her voice tinged with defensive concern for Amanda. I pulled out the first set of documents, copies of the security footage screenshots showing Amanda entering my building without permission. Amanda has been accessing my apartment without my knowledge for the past 6 months, using a spare key to enter when I'm working night shifts at the hospital. Amanda's face went pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. "Christy, I can explain that. You gave me that key for emergencies, and I've only used it when absolutely necessary." "Emergencies like hosting parties with your friends?" I asked, producing photos of Amanda arriving with wine bottles and other women. "Or like giving the key to your teenage babysitter so she and her boyfriend could use my apartment as a hangout spot?" Derek stepped forward, his jaw set with determination. "Amanda, we talked about this. You promised me you would tell the truth today." The family members exchanged worried glances as the tension between Derek and Amanda became obvious. Emma, Tyler, and Sophia continued playing on the swing set, blissfully unaware that their world was about to change dramatically. I continued presenting evidence, methodically showing the family photos of items that Amanda had stolen from my apartment and hidden in her bedroom. Aunt Lisa gasped when she recognized my grandmother's antique jewelry in one of the photos pieces that she remembered from family gatherings years earlier. "Amanda, those are Grandma Peterson's jewelry pieces," Aunt Lisa said quietly. "I remember when she gave them to Christy before she passed away." "This is all a terrible misunderstanding," Amanda protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "I was just borrowing a few things occasionally. I always intended to return them." "What about the forged documents claiming you helped purchase my apartment?" I asked, producing the paperwork that Patrick had analyzed. "And the $30,000 you convinced Mom to borrow against her house to fund your European vacation?" Helen's face crumpled with shock and confusion. "Amanda, you told me that money was to protect your investment in Christy's property. You said you had contributed to her down payment and needed funds to avoid losing your share." "I never contributed anything to Christy's apartment purchase," Amanda admitted quietly, her elaborate facade finally beginning to crumble. "I just needed the money temporarily for some financial difficulties." Uncle Bob, with his teacher's instinct for recognizing deception, asked the question that cut to the heart of the matter. "Amanda, what financial difficulties required $30,000 that you couldn't discuss with your own husband?" The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of children playing and the distant hum of traffic from the main road. Amanda looked around at the circle of family members, all waiting for an explanation that would make sense of the betrayal they were witnessing. Detective Martinez spoke for the first time since arriving, her voice professional but not unkind. Amanda, this would be an appropriate time to be completely honest about your financial situation and gambling activities. The word gambling hung in the air like a physical presence. Helen actually staggered backward, grasping the edge of the picnic table for support as the implications became clear. "You've been gambling?" Morgan asked, her youthful voice filled with disbelief. "Like seriously gambling with real money?" Amanda's composure finally shattered completely. Tears streamed down her face, leaving dark streaks of mascara on her cheeks as she struggled to find words that could possibly explain or justify her actions. "I started playing online poker during Tyler's nap time," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Just small amounts at first, maybe $20 or $30. But when I won, it felt incredible, like I was finally good at something that could make real money." Derek moved closer to his wife, not to comfort her, but to ensure that the entire truth finally came out. "Tell them about the debt, Amanda. Tell them how much you actually owe." $47,000. Amanda sobbed. "Maybe more. I lost track of which credit cards I used and which loans I took out. I kept thinking that one big win would solve everything." The family stood in stunned silence, trying to process the scope of Amanda's deception and the financial damage she had inflicted on multiple family members. But I still had one more revelation that would shake our family's foundation to its core. "There's something else," I said, producing a final set of documents from the folder. "Amanda, tell them what you did with Grandpa's inheritance money that was supposed to fund college educations for all the grandchildren." The devastation on my mother's face was almost too painful to witness as she realized that Amanda's betrayal had extended even further than anyone had imagined. The following Monday morning, I sat in the sterile waiting area of the family court building, watching Derek fill out emergency custody paperwork with shaking hands. The events of yesterday's confrontation had moved swiftly from emotional revelation to legal necessity, and the reality of broken families was settling over all of us like a heavy blanket. Judge Patricia Hoffman, a woman in her early 50s with silver-streaked hair and kind but firm eyes, reviewed the documents that Derek had submitted, requesting temporary custody of Emma, Tyler, and Sophia. The evidence folder that Detective Martinez had helped us organize painted a clear picture of financial fraud, identity theft, and gambling addiction that had created an unstable environment for the children. "Mr. Walsh, I understand this is an extremely difficult situation for your family," Judge Hoffman said, her voice carrying both authority and compassion. "Can you explain to the court why you believe immediate intervention is necessary for the safety and welfare of your children?" Derek cleared his throat nervously, still adjusting to the reality that his wife's actions had forced him to seek court protection for his own children. "Your Honor, my wife Amanda has been engaging in criminal fraud and has developed a severe gambling addiction that has compromised our family's financial stability and emotional security." The social worker assigned to the case, Linda Chen, had already interviewed the children separately and compiled a report that detailed the emotional impact of Amanda's behavior on their young minds. Her findings were heartbreaking in their clarity about how Amanda's deception had affected even her own children. Emma, the oldest child, has been aware of her mother's unauthorized access to her aunt's apartment and has been instructed to keep it secret. Linda reported to the judge, "She exhibits signs of anxiety related to keeping family secrets and shows confusion about appropriate boundaries regarding other people's property." Tyler, at 7 years old, had told the social worker that Mommy sometimes cried late at night while looking at her computer and that Daddy had been sleeping in the guest room for several weeks. Little Sophia, barely 4, simply said that she missed Aunt Christy and didn't understand why Mommy was angry all the time. "The children need stability and honest communication," Linda continued. "Mr. Walsh appears committed to providing both, while Mrs. Walsh requires intensive treatment before she can safely resume parenting responsibilities." Amanda sat at a separate table with her court-appointed attorney, looking fragile and defeated in a simple black dress that replaced her usual designer clothing. The consequences of her choices had stripped away the facade of success she had maintained for so long, revealing someone who desperately needed help rather than continued enablement. "Mrs. Walsh, do you understand the charges against you?" Judge Hoffman asked directly. "Yes, Your Honor," Amanda replied quietly. "Identity theft, property fraud, and financial elder abuse for manipulating my mother into taking out a loan based on false information." The elder abuse charge had been Detective Martinez's suggestion, recognizing that Amanda had specifically targeted our mother's vulnerability and limited financial resources. Helen had been devastated to learn that pursuing this charge was necessary to protect other potential victims, but she ultimately agreed that Amanda needed to face real consequences. "I'm ordering supervised visitation only until Mrs. Walsh completes a comprehensive treatment program for gambling, addiction, and financial crimes," Judge Hoffman decided. "Mr. Walsh will have primary custody with Mrs. Walsh, required to attend weekly counseling sessions and submit to random financial audits." The treatment program was located at Riverside Recovery Center, a facility that specialized in behavioral addictions and had a good track record with gambling disorders. Amanda would spend 60 days in residential treatment, followed by 6 months of intensive outpatient therapy and regular attendance at Gamblers Anonymous meetings. Dr. Rebecca Stone, the therapist who would be overseeing Amanda's treatment, met with our family the following week to explain the recovery process and set realistic expectations for rebuilding trust and relationships. Gambling addiction is a serious mental health condition that often develops alongside other underlying issues, Dr. Stone explained in her calm, professional manner. Amanda's behavior escalated over time, and recovery will require addressing not just the gambling, but also the patterns of deception and boundary violations that enabled her addiction. I found myself torn between anger at Amanda's betrayals and compassion for the underlying pain that had driven her to such desperate measures. The sister I had grown up with, who had once been my closest confidant and dearest friend, was buried somewhere beneath layers of addiction and desperation. "Can our family relationships be repaired?" Derek asked, voicing the question that haunted all of us. "Recovery is possible, but it requires genuine commitment from Amanda and patience from everyone affected by her actions," Dr. Stone replied honestly. "The financial restitution and legal consequences are necessary for accountability, but emotional healing will take much longer." Helen had decided to sell her house and move into a smaller apartment to pay off the loan she had taken out based on Amanda's lies. The decision broke my heart, watching my mother sacrifice her stability to clean up financial damage she had never caused, but Helen insisted it was the right thing to do. "I enabled Amanda's behavior by not asking harder questions," Helen admitted during one of our family therapy sessions. "I wanted to believe that my daughter was successful and generous, so I ignored warning signs that should have been obvious." Derek worked with Detective Martinez to recover as much stolen property as possible, returning items to me that Amanda had taken from my apartment over the months of unauthorized access. Some things, like my grandmother's broken vase, could never be restored, but the gesture of acknowledgement meant everything to me. The children were resilient in the way that only young people can be, gradually adjusting to their new reality with Derek's steady care and support. Emma in particular seemed relieved to no longer carry the burden of family secrets, and her anxiety decreased noticeably once the truth was finally out in the open. But the most significant discovery came 6 weeks into Amanda's treatment, when Dr. Stone contacted Derek with information that would explain, if not excuse, the roots of Amanda's destructive behavior. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my renovated apartment preparing dinner for a family gathering that would have been impossible to imagine during the dark days of Amanda's exposure and legal consequences. The space felt truly mine again after changing locks, replacing stolen items, and most importantly, establishing clear boundaries about access and privacy. Amanda emerged from the Riverside Recovery Center transformed in ways that went beyond appearance, though the physical changes were noticeable too. The designer clothes and perfectly styled hair had been replaced by simple jeans and a natural look that made her seem younger and more genuine than she had appeared in years. Christy, I know words will never be enough. Amanda said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. But I need you to know that I understand the full scope of what I did to you, to our family, and to my own children. The Amanda who spoke these words bore little resemblance to the entitled, manipulative woman who had demanded access to my apartment just months earlier. Through intensive therapy and the brutal honesty required by gamblers, anonymous, she had begun to understand the progression of choices that had led her to violate everyone she claimed to love. The gambling wasn't just about money. Amanda continued explaining insights she had gained through treatment. It was about feeling powerful and successful when everything else in my life felt like I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. Dr. Emily Rodriguez, the family therapist who had been working with all of us, had helped Amanda trace her gambling addiction back to postpartum depression, following Sophia's birth 4 years earlier. The depression had gone undiagnosed and untreated, creating a perfect storm of low self-esteem, anxiety, and impulsive behavior that gambling had temporarily relieved. I started playing online poker during Sophia's nap time because it was the only time I felt smart and capable. Amanda explained to the family during one of our joint therapy sessions. When I won, it felt like proof that I was worth something. When I lost, I convinced myself that one more game would fix everything. Derek had struggled tremendously with the decision to stay married to Amanda, but their work with Dr. Rodriguez had helped him understand the difference between enabling destructive behavior and supporting genuine recovery. Their relationship would never be the same, but it might eventually become more honest and healthy than it had ever been before. Trust has to be rebuilt through actions, not words, Derek told me during one of our weekly check-ins. Amanda knows that she's on probation not just legally, but in our marriage. Recovery is a daily choice, and she has to keep making that choice every single day. The children had thrived under Derek's primary custody, developing security and confidence that came from living in an environment where adult behavior was consistent and trustworthy. Emma, now 10, had started a journal at Dr. Rodriguez's suggestion, and her entries reflected a child who was learning healthy ways to process difficult emotions. I don't hate Mommy. Emma wrote in one entry that Derek shared with Amanda's permission. I'm just sad that she was sick and couldn't tell us the truth, but I'm happy that she's getting better and that Daddy explains things to us now. Tyler and Sophia had adjusted well to their new routine, which included supervised visits with Amanda twice a week and unlimited access to me as their aunt. The court had modified the custody arrangement after Amanda completed her residential treatment, allowing for gradual increases in her parenting time as she demonstrated continued recovery. Helen had moved into a lovely one-bedroom apartment near my building, downsizing by choice, rather than financial necessity, after Amanda began making monthly restitution payments through her new job. Our mother's relationship with both daughters had been forever changed by the experience, but the honesty that replaced our previous family dynamics had actually brought us closer together. I learned that loving someone doesn't mean protecting them from the consequences of their choices. Helen reflected during our last family therapy session. I thought I was being a good mother by always believing Amanda, but I was actually enabling her to hurt herself and everyone around her. Amanda's restitution plan would take years to complete, but she approached it with the same determination that had previously fueled her destructive behavior. She found work at New Beginnings, a non-profit organization that provided support services for people struggling with various addictions, and discovered that helping others gave her the sense of purpose she had been seeking through gambling. Mark Sullivan, the director of New Beginnings, had been impressed by Amanda's honesty about her own struggles and her commitment to making amends. People in recovery often become our most effective counselors, he explained when I visited the organization to learn more about Amanda's work. They understand the shame and desperation that drive addictive behaviors, and they can offer hope because they've experienced genuine change. The Christmas dinner that brought our family together in December took place in Derek's house, with everyone contributing food and helping with preparations. The equality of shared responsibility felt revolutionary after years of Amanda expecting others to accommodate her demands and convenience. Emma, Tyler, and Sophia played together with toys that belonged to them, legitimately, in a home where everything had been purchased honestly and maintained through genuine family cooperation. The children's laughter filled rooms where secrets had once created tension, and their ease with both parents reflected the emotional security that comes from living with authentic adults. "I want to say something to everyone," Amanda announced as we gathered around the dinner table laden with dishes that represented everyone's efforts. "This is the first Christmas in years where I'm not hiding anything from any of you. That feels like the best gift I could possibly give or receive." The relationship between Amanda and me would never return to the unquestioned closeness of our childhood, but it had evolved into something more valuable: respect, based on truth, rather than affection, based on denial. I had learned to love my sister enough to hold her accountable, and she had learned to love herself enough to accept responsibility. Derek carved the turkey with steady hands, no longer trembling from anxiety about hidden financial problems or wondering which version of his wife would emerge from day to day. His children could depend on his consistency, and his marriage, while forever changed, was built on a foundation of honesty rather than mutual deception. "What I've learned," I said when Amanda asked me to share my reflections on our family's journey, "is that boundaries aren't walls meant to keep people out. They're guidelines that create safe spaces for genuine relationships to grow." The woman who had once demanded access to my apartment without permission now asked, before borrowing even small items, understanding that respect for boundaries demonstrated love rather than restriction. The sister who had stolen my belongings now brought thoughtful gifts that she had purchased with money she had earned honestly. As our evening wound down and families prepared to return to their respective homes, I realized that our family had experienced something that many families never achieved: the transformation of crisis into genuine growth. The pain of Amanda's betrayals had forced all of us to examine our own patterns of enabling denial and misplaced loyalty. I want to ask you something that I think about often. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace in your family and protecting yourself from someone you love? How do you balance compassion with accountability when someone's behavior is hurting everyone around them? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please consider giving it a like and sharing it with someone who might benefit from hearing it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about real families working through difficult situations with honesty and hope. Thank you for listening to my family's journey, and I hope it helps you navigate whatever challenges you might be facing in your own relationships. Remember that standing up for yourself doesn't mean abandoning the people you love. Sometimes it means loving them enough to insist on the truth.